Hey, it's Ray, and over the past couple weeks, along with my new painting process video, I've released 4 visualizers, each for one of the tracks from the EP I released back in December. And I thought it'd be good to just share with you guys the process behind those visualizers. It only took me about an hour or so to learn how to do that, and I thought it'd be good to share that with you guys so that you can learn it faster and go making your own visualizers too. So the idea for it came from a lot of, on YouTube there's a lot of these channels that just upload songs, and they'll have a cool picture with it and maybe some cool audio spectrum effects with some parallaxing, and I thought, hey, that'd be cool to make. So I figured out how to do it, and that's what this video is about. I'm going to show you guys how to do it too. So we're going to be using Adobe After Effects for this video. And After Effects is something I've picked up very recently, so if you're beginning After Effects, I hope this is a very good step forward to help you guys get some experience with it. And yeah, so I've just opened up here to the default screen that we get. It's just an empty project with no compositions whatsoever, just a blank empty layout. And I want to click on the New Composition button. And firstly, we're going to name this comp, so I'm going to name it one of my songs titles. So I'm going to pick my Metro track, and I'm going to go dash visualizer. Make sure you spell it right too while we're here. Visualizer. There we go. As for the preset, I've got these custom settings put in that I'll walk you guys through. It might pick one of these ones by default, but we don't need to worry about that. We just need to worry about these. So we need to change the width and height of our video to be, let's say, just the standard high definition resolution, which is in most cases 1920 by 1080, which is the size of the screen I'm using right now. The pixel aspect ratio we want as square pixels. The frame rate we want at 30 frames per second. You can choose 60 at your discretion. And resolution, I'm going to just leave that. That's going to be the preview resolution. I'm going to leave that at 1/4 for my computer because while I'm recording this, it does take a bit of resources. So we're going to just leave that at, you can put it at full if you'd like, but I'm going to leave it at 1/4 for the time being. Start time code, we can leave it 0s. For the duration, now usually most pop songs go for around 3 to 4 minutes. So I've just selected 4 minutes as my duration. And if the song exceeds that, we can just make this longer. If it doesn't exceed it, we can trim the video later on. Doesn't really matter. We'll just choose 4 to give us some good breathing room, and we'll go ahead and click OK. Now it gives us a composition, which is displayed here in our project. This is all the files inside of our After Effects project. So we've got a composition, and here is the composition and what it looks like as a composition. And this is what it looks like as a video. This is the composition view. And at the moment, it's just a blank 1920 by 1080 box. Now, to get our composition in order, we want to add some media to this. So I've already got some pre-made drawings all separated out onto different layers because I like to get some cool parallaxing going on with this image. So I've got a sky, I've got like a foreground with a guy on a hill, we've got clouds, and we've got this cityscape. So to get these in, I'm just going to hold down Shift and select these all and click and drop them into the Project tab. And there they are, all my images. And you see when I click on them individually, they preview up in that little corner. So I want to click and drag these into my composition. So I'll start with the sky, and there's my sky, and then I'll do the foreground, and you can see I can put this behind or in front of the sky. I can then take my clouds and pop those in between those two. There we go. And then I can take my cityscape and pop that there. So now we've got this nice image set up for us. But if we hit play, so if you press spacebar, you'll see that nothing really happens yet. It's just this image. To get the nice parallaxing effect that I'd like to achieve, we need to set this up as like a 3D composition, which After Effects can actually do. And to make a layer, one of these layers exist in 3D space, we need to tick this cube box. And if that doesn't show up for you, just click this toggle down the bottom that says toggle switches / modes until you get these little options. And I want to click the box for the ground, the foreground. And you'll now see that I've got these arrows pointing up in my viewport. I also want to do this for the cityscape and for the clouds. As for the sky, I'm just going to leave this as a 2D layer for a reason which I'll explain later on. So I've got these 3 layers as 3D layers, but if I hit play, still not really much of a difference yet. But now After Effects will treat them as 3-dimensional objects. So to get them to actually look and appear 3D, we need to use a camera to render all of these. So if we go to our layer menu and go new, and then we want a camera. Now there's going to be a bunch of settings that pop up here. We don't really need to worry about them. We're just going to name this to camera. This is going to be our only camera, and we're going to click OK. And you'll now see we have a camera inside of our viewport, but if we hit play, still not much of a difference. So what I'd like to happen for this camera is I want it to kind of wobble, just very subtly. And to do that, I want it to sort of track an invisible target, and that target is going to wobble about and the camera's going to follow it. So to create just an empty object, we're going to go back to that layer menu and go new, and then we're going to go null object. And it's going to just create an empty null object just in our composition. And you'll see it creates it also in our project. It'll put it in the solids folder. So I might want to rename this to camera target. And you'll see it renames it down here as well. So this camera target is just going to subtly wobble about. And you notice when I open up this transform component of it, you'll see that it does have a few settings for its position and its scale, its rotation. Now normally I'd think to just animate these all manually, but After Effects actually does have a shortcut way to just automatically have it wiggle. And firstly, we need to make this a 3D layer, of course. So we need to click the cube, and you'll now see a bunch of other settings pop up for the 3D side. So we want to use orientation in this case, and we're going to hold down the Alt key and click on that little stopwatch next to orientation, and it'll open up this kind of macros editor, and we can type in just a very simple command for it to do. And luckily, After Effects has a command called wiggle. Then we open a set of brackets, and let's just do, let's say, 2, 2, close bracket. And now, if we play, we still don't really see anything. That's because we need the camera to follow this null object. So if we collapse all these down, we need to get the camera as a child of the camera target. And to do that, you just want to go to this squiggly little whip icon, and we want to click it and drag it from the camera into the camera target. And you'll see that if I release my mouse, the camera is now going to follow the camera target. So now if I hit play, you'll now see a lot of wobbling going on, but our image still looks very flat. And that's because they're all kind of, there's nothing really sticking out. It's all just a flat image at the moment. So we'll need to fix that a bit later on. So now we can see this wobbling happening now, and I'm going to start to separate out those layers. So let's start with the foreground. Now if we open up the transform part, you'll see that it's got a position setting, and there's 3 different numbers in here. There's this first number, which controls side to side, the second number, which controls up and down, and the third number, which controls forward and backwards. And you see if I move it backwards, it goes behind the clouds, and if I move it the other way, it goes towards the camera. So I want to move this very close to the camera. And you'll notice now you can't really see it anymore. So to fix that, we're just going to go to scale and scale this down to about 30% roughly, should do it. So I'm just going to leave it at that and we're going to do that and hit play. And you'll now see that this foreground looks like it's way in front of the rest of the image, which is good. However, it seems to be wobbling quite a lot. And that is because our target that the camera is following is way off in the distance. So to sort of further explain what's going on, I need to switch my view. So I'm going to go to where it says active camera and change it to one of these custom views here. So now it's going to show us our scene, but from a different angle. And you see if I use my scroll wheel to zoom out, you see there's my camera over here. And this here is my target. And there's my foreground. And when we play it, you can't really see where the camera is, but it's pretty much wobbling, it's pivoting from here, which is making this look like it's moving quite a lot. So we want to move this closer to the foreground, so we might move it about there. And likewise, we'll need to move this back to compensate. And now if I go back to active view and zoom in a bit, you'll see that now the camera looks like it's now closer to the foreground rather than to the background. And that's more like what we want. However, we're going to have to do some adjustments because you'll see these layers are now starting to clip and they're not finishing exactly. They're kind of just stopping before they reach the end of the picture. So to fix that up, we just simply scale it up a little to give it some bleeding room. And I'll zoom out of my viewport a bit. Okay, the foreground seems to be scaled nicely. The background's a little off though. Let's go back to that custom view and let's click on one of these. So I'm going to move that foreground a bit closer. I'm going to move it about here. I might move my clouds a bit closer as well, just so that they're moving a little bit. I'm going to go back to active camera, and everything's a lot bigger now. So I'll need to go to the transform and to the scale component to just keep these in check. So the trick is you kind of want to get these scaled just enough so that they're not going to get cut off on the edges there from when the camera wiggles about. So I'm going to go to that cityscape part as well and scale this. So you see if I scale it too small, it starts to clip over the edges there. So I might just scale it at about 56 or so. Oh, no, I still see a bit of clipping there, so I might scale it up to about 63. Okay, that seems pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Again, with the camera wobbling, you can adjust those values to whatever you wish. So if you open up transform again and go to orientation and open up this line here, you can change these numbers. Now, the first number tends to pertain to speed. So if I change that to about 10, it starts to wobble very fast. And then the second is how the velocity of how much distance it covers. So if I change that to 10 as well, it just goes absolutely haywire. So if I had that on 1 and 10, it'll go very far, travel a lot of distance, but very slowly. And you can sort of experiment with these yourself and get a nice feel for what they do. There is a third number as well, which we can add in. It's completely optional. But this number, let's just go with 5, for example, will give it a bit of noise and randomness. So you see it starts to wiggle a bit more. I tend to like having a bit of noise in there just to make it a little less repetitive. So for the speed, I might make that 0.5, and for the velocity, I might do 2, and the noise, randomness, I might do at 1, and see how that works out. Okay, that's very gentle. So if I zoom in closer, you'll see it's very gentle now. I might make the wobbleness just a bit more, maybe 2 for that last number. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Sweet. I might just move that foreground just a little closer, just so that we get a bit more dynamics happening. So if I zoom out here, I go back to my custom view and just move that closer, just to see what happens. And I might move the target closer too, and the camera back a bit. So if I go back to the active camera, I'll need to scale that foreground down a bit first. So open up the scale, move it a bit down a bit. Okay, that's starting to look like it's a bit more spacious, which is cool. Okay, I like that. Okay, that's pretty good. The next step is, well, that's pretty much the visualizer, the parallax component of our video. Next, we want to get some audio spectrum visualizing happening here. And I'm just noticing now that the clouds are clipping off the side there, so I might scale up those clouds just a bit. There we go. That seems good. All right. So now for the next part, we want to have like a nice audio spectrum in our scene. And to do that, we need to make a solid layer. So we need to go up to the layer menu, new, and then solid. And we're going to call this audio dash, or just audio spectrum. And we're going to click make comp size and then press OK. And it's going to give us just this black box for the moment. but we're going to turn this into a visualizer. Now, for you guys, I'm not sure where it's going to put it. It might put it behind everything, it might put it in front of everything. We want to put it in front of everything for the moment, just so that we can see what's going on. And then we want to go to Effect, and then Generate, and then Audio Spectrum. And you'll now see that the black goes away, and we've got these pink dots going across our screen. And if we hit play, we've got our parallaxing, but these dots aren't doing anything yet. And these dots are the audio spectrum. So to get these to start reacting to stuff, we first need to get some audio in our composition. So we're gonna, you'll see that there's these two tabs now that are kind of shown up where our project panel is. So we've got project and we've got effects. We want to leave that open, so we don't want to close that, but we just want to click off to the side to project. And we need to put a song in here. So I'm going to go to my File Explorer. I'm going to find a song. And let's just take, here's Metro, one of my tracks. I'm going to click and drag that in. And there it is. Then I'm going to click and drag that into the composition. I'm just going to put that underneath everything. And now if I start playing, it starts to play the song too, which is good. So now we want this spectrum to react to that audio, and to do that we need to click on the spectrum, we need to go back to the effects controls, and we need to change the audio layer source property. So where it says audio layer, you want to click on this first drop down and then go to your song title or whatever the layer is named, and you'll now start to see some changes once I've applied that. So if I hit play, you now start to see it reacts to the audio, which is pretty cool. However, there's still some adjustments I'd like to make to the spectrum. So firstly is we can actually change where on the composition it's drawn. So we've got these two nodes, we've got the start point and the end point, and you can see them sort of highlighted here, and you can actually click and drag them around our composition. So I'd like to maybe hold down Shift, and just so it snaps along that direction, and I'm just going to move it about here-ish. And then this end I'm going to move about here, because I just want it in this little area. Again, you can modify these values manually with these numbers. So if you modify one of these numbers, you'll see it makes a change to my composition. But yeah, for the moment, that's how I like it. Next stage is the start frequency. That's the one we're going to touch. And start and end frequency kind of work together, and it really depends on the song to adjust these. So if I hit play, you'll see that a lot of my activity here is in the very lower end of the frequency range. So 2000 is a bit high for the end, and that's like the end over here. So at the end point, it's going to stop at 2000, which is quite a high frequency. So if I bring that down to, that's a bit too low, maybe let's say 900 or so, you'll see that the lower frequencies now get stretched across a bit further. And now it looks a lot more lively and dynamic across the entire line. So I'm pretty happy with that, but there's not a lot going on in these first two bars, so I might change the start frequency to 40. That's a bit better. And then you'll see when the kick drum comes in at some point, you'll start to see those lower frequencies kick in. Nice. Alright, the next setting is frequency bands, and that essentially counts how many of these lines exist between the start and end point. So if you drag that up, you can make it very dense like this, or you can make it very thin and spread out like this. Really up to you and how you want to do it. I'm going to leave mine at about 76 or so. Okay, that seems pretty nice. Maybe 72, just in case. Alright, I'm happy with that. Next setting is maximum height, which is pretty self-explanatory. When we drag that upwards, it pretty much makes this a lot more extreme and exaggerated. So we can make it take up the entire composition, or we can make it very, very subtle as well. It's really up to you and how you want to do it. I'm going to set my maximum height to maybe 400. Okay, maybe 700. Okay, maybe 600. Alright, that seems good. Next stage is audio duration. Now this tends to pertain to how long that those spectrum lines will stay at their frequency. And you'll see what I mean. When I drag this up, they're very slow and relaxed, but if I drag it down, they're very, very responsive and sensitive. So again, that's up to you and how you want it to look. I tend to stick to around 120 for my duration. So it's sort of still responsive, but not too smooth, but just smooth enough for me. Next setting is offset, and that pretty much offsets the waveform so it has a bit of delay. I tend to keep this at 0 for most cases. Next setting is thickness, and this pertains to how thin or how thick that these lines are. So if you drag that up, you see that they get very fat, and if we drag it down, they get very skinny. So I'm going to maybe use 6. Or, oh sorry, wrong setting, that's offset. I don't want that at 6. So I'll try thickness at about 6. I'm pretty happy with that. Next is softness, and that pretty much pertains to how soft that these lines will appear or how solid they appear. I tend to like a very solid line, very crisp and solid lines, so I leave that at 0%. And you'll see that they're very nice and solid there. Next setting is inside and outside color, and I'll zoom in close so you can see this setting take effect. You'll notice that they actually have these little frequency bars have outlines. So if I change my inside color to white, for example, you'll see that they now all have these pink outlines from the outside color. So for my waveform, I'm just going to color pick. I'm going to use this eyedropper and color pick from my image and use this blue. And I might just go ahead and make it a bit darker as well while I'm there. Sweet, I'm happy with that. And I'm going to change the inside color to that same color as well. So I'm going to click the eyedropper and select the color. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. Next up is hue interpolation. Now this is quite an interesting setting. If you drag this slider along a bit, this little radial thing, you'll start to see that our waveform starts to get color a bit. And if we drag it more so, you'll see it starts to turn into a rainbow, waveform. And again, it's up to you how you want to use this. I tend to not have it enabled, but I'll leave this on just to show you some of the other settings. So I might leave that at about 75. And the next setting is that also is pertaining to the hue is dynamic hue phase, and then it pretty much will cycle through those colors depending on the audio. But if I disable that, it just stays at those different colors. So if I shift that to about this much, you'll see that this is always that purple and the edges are always green. But if I turn it on, it cycles and they go all over the place. So again, up to you how you want to use it. The next setting though is color symmetry, and that will pretty much keep the ends at the same color, so it kind of mirrors along the waveform. So if I turn it off, you see that the end here is green and here is blue, but if I turn it on, it's blue here, purple, and then blue again, sort of like a mirror. So for my specific waveform, I don't want any hue, so I'm just going to turn that to 0, and it's just all that blue color. Next setting is the display options. Now, this pertains to how the waveform will be displayed, and you'll see what I mean in just a second. So if I change this from digital to analog lines, it'll now display as like a heart rate monitor sort of look. So it's sort of like a pulse. And then the second option is analog dots, which is pretty much little dots like this. Again, it's up to you on which is your preference. I tend to like to use digital. That's my preference. The next setting is deciding which side of this line do we want the waveform to play on. So if we choose side A, it'll play on the top. And if you want side B, it'll play on the bottom. And if you want both, we do side A and B. I'm going to leave mine at both, side A and B. And that I'm pretty happy with. The next setting I tend not to use, it's called duration averaging, and that pretty much will average out all of the heights along the entire spectrum. Again, it's up to you if you want to use it. I'll disable it for my example, just so I get some nice dynamics happening. And then there's composite on origin, which will pretty much show our solid plus the waveform. So that original black solid we made will then be visible, but for our case we want it disabled so that we can see our artwork in the background there. And that's about it really, that's the waveform part. The next thing we can do is we can sort of make this waveform part of our 3D composition and give it a bit of parallaxing too. So to do that, we simply enable that cube so it's a 3D layer now, and you'll start to see it's put it in a nice place here. it sort of put it behind those clouds, which I think is pretty cool. If you want it in a different spot, however, you can simply, we can open up the transform and we can change the position, and we can move that, slide that up and down. We can move it very close. If you want more control, you can go to one of those views and move it in here. So you can move it very close to the foreground if we want. So there it is there. See, it sort of starts to get pixelated when I move it too close. I liked it very much behind those clouds, so I might change the position for the Z axis back to 0, so it puts it nice tucked in the clouds there. I reckon that's a nice effect. And there we have it, guys. We have a parallaxed 3D image with some artwork and an audio visualizer. So that about wraps up our tutorial for today's video. If you guys found this video helpful, please feel free to leave a like on the video, and if you feel so inclined, feel free to leave a comment as well. I'm more than happy to see your thoughts on it. And also, please include anything you make with this knowledge. If you end up doing anything with it, please link it in the comments somewhere. I'd love to see what you do with it. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. If you want to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button so you don't miss an upload from the channel, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.